Well, it had to happen sooner or later, and here we are. On March 28th, the ship scanning the seabed for MH370, Armada 7806, stowed its AUVs and set sail to the north, putting an end to the second phase of the third seabed search for MH370. As I speak, the ship is currently underway for Singapore, about 2,300 miles, nautical miles that is, away to the north. It's going 10 knots, so it should be on the order of 230 hours or 9.5 days. April 8th is what's showing on the AIS. Today, I'm going to talk about what it's accomplished and what might lie ahead based on what we know and a little guesswork, and why I think those of us who are expecting hard answers from the seabed search are likely going to have to wait a little while. Also, you'll remember from last week, I gave you some background into one of the leading lights of the MH370 community. Today, I'm going to do another one. I'm going to explain who is Richard Godfrey, what are some of the extraordinary claims he has made, and what is the nature of his experience. I think you're going to find it astonishing. All that's coming up right now. Hello, everybody. It's aviation journalist Jeff Wise back with you. As always, relying heavily on Kevin Rupp, who's sharing his marine tracking data with the world and also his personal knowledge. You should check out his webpage on Facebook. Special thanks to David Byers, who's stayed really relentlessly on top of things for us on the show page chat. And speaking of the show page, if you'd like a free newsletter that goes out with the release of each of these episodes, you should definitely visit the show page at findingmh370.com. You can subscribe and get a free newsletter that goes out with each episode. Or if you want to support this show, you can choose a paid subscription, which is incredibly helpful and for which I'm so grateful. I'd like to thank all the paid subscribers and a special shout out to the subscribers who signed up this past month. I'm going to need my glasses for this one. Jonathan Clowes 80, Heather Lohman 20, Planet Jillabine, and RS Data Inc. You are so awesome. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. Okay, let's get right to it. As of Friday, March 28th, Armada 7806, as I said, is steaming northward at 10 knots, leaving the Phase 2 search area behind for now. Currently showing destination of Singapore with an arrival on April 8th. They've done about 185 kilometer long strip that's about 25 kilometers wide. So for my math, that's about 5,000 square kilometers, more or less. I think they did about 7,000 square kilometers in phase one. So by my rough math, what they've searched out does not yet equal the 15,000 square kilometers that they set out to do initially, or said they were going to do. Now, it's not exactly unexpected that they're leaving around now. Kevin Rupp has been saying that the crew has to be swapped out every month, and they're about due for that. So what is surprising, though, is that they're not going to Fremantle, which is the nearest port, about 1,000 nautical miles away to the east. They're going to Singapore, which is twice as far away. All right, why are they doing that? Kevin seems to be very well sourced, and what he's saying is that Armada 7806 is apparently done with searching for the near future and maybe forever, because while it's a brand new boat, it has the latest technology, it's a little on the small side, and it's really not optimized for AUV deployment. It can deploy just 3 AUVs from these detachable hangars that it has on deck. That's a lot less than the 8 that the ship used in 2018 could deploy. So not unsurprisingly, Armada 7806 has been covering ground a lot slower than its predecessor in 2018. It's less than half as fast, actually. So what Ocean Infinity really needs is a bigger boat, if they are ambitious. If they just wanted to do 15,000 square kilometers, it wouldn't be a problem. I think that this is a sign that they have bigger ambitions, which I think is great. So we know that they have these 78s, these 78-meter boats. They spent the last few years also building bigger boats as well, the Armada 86 class. That's 86 meters long instead of 78 meters long, so significantly larger. They also have an older boat called the Island Pride that's very capable. Of course, it takes a while to move ships and assets around, but Kevin thinks that the most likely scenario is that they'll wait until the southern spring starts in November, which is not great. It would be lovely if they would just go all in right now and search as much as they can. That's not going to happen. Remember, when Malaysia announced that this deal had been struck, they talked about an 18-month window. And I think they weren't whistling Dixie. It sounds like they're really going to use at least a significant chunk of that. This is speculation, I admit, okay? Now, it's interesting to note that on both Phase 1 and Phase 2, Armada 7806 accomplished, in each case, one noteworthy goal, I would say. In Phase 1, they searched out the data holidays that Victor Iannello had suggested. And in Phase 2, they searched out the area that Jean-Luc Marchand and Patrick Blely had staked out. Marchand and Blely spent a lot of time and energy laying out their ideas. They've been talking about it for years. And really, for a while there was no realistic expectation that anyone who was proposing an area in the southern seabed would see their area get searched, because it didn't seem like anything was going to ever happen again. So the fact that it was searched, I think, is really remarkable. And I wanted to hear what their thoughts were now that their ideas had been put to the test. I emailed them. I emailed with them in the past, so I reached out to them again earlier this week. I really wanted to hear what it felt like, really, to see your area get searched. This idea that you had proposed and put down on paper, but really had no realistic expectation would actually get searched. On the other hand, it's great that it was searched. On the other hand, it did seem to me like probably the plane was not there. At least we hadn't heard any sign from Ocean Infinity that they'd found the wreckage. But so did they feel elation? Did they feel heartbreak? A little bit of both. Jean-Luc got back to me. He said, quote, "So today it seems to me too early to draw conclusions on what are the results. My view is that during the contract negotiations, Ocean Infinity had no interest to let anything transpire from their scan. As I write to you, the vessel is rushing back toward the northern part of our recommended zone, so it appears that the signature gave them a new energy." This was a few days ago. At the time, the ship was heading north. It wasn't clear that it was heading all the way north of Singapore. It looked like maybe it was just repositioning. Blely wrote, "To date, Ocean Infinity has not said anything, neither for the independent group nor for us. So let's wait to see the results before speaking. As far as I'm concerned, with all the elements that I cited to you in previous emails and many others, I recalculated this trajectory with the help of Jean-Luc, and that we verified and published in our analysis. I have no reason to date to recalculate another zone." I had asked him if, in light of the results of the search, he remained utterly convinced that the plane really did go into the Southern Ocean. He wrote, and I quote, "I have never doubted that it headed south, as you say." Okay, so my impression is that they think that they still really have faith in their analysis. And once AUVs collect imagery on the seabed, it takes time to upload it, to process it. Kevin has said that it might take as much time to process it as it does to collect. So it could take, and these things have a duty time of 4 days, so it could take a week or even more from the moment it spots wreckage to the public hearing about it. Or maybe even Ocean Infinity, knows that they found it, but they just aren't telling anybody. I think that's a little implausible, but we'll see. Meanwhile, there was also, in parallel, a bit of a kerfuffle on social media. An outfit called Voice MH370, which is a group of the relatives of the missing. They posted this on Twitter. It says, "No find, no fee contract between Malaysia and Ocean Infinity has been signed. Our sincere thanks and appreciation to everyone who made this possible." So I can understand why they were under the impression that the contract was signed. A lot of people misunderstood the press release about the cabinet's approval. They said, yes, we've agreed to the search. They thought it meant that the contract had been signed. And until we hear otherwise, my guess is that some family members based their social media post on that misunderstanding. Now, we all are rooting for the family members. But let's face it, there's a lot of misunderstanding going around when it comes to MH370. Family members are not immune. I've been banging my drum on this topic for years because, frankly, It's a major roadblock that we have to overcome if we're going to solve this mystery. And that is why I think it's important to know who some of the characters are who are involved in this mystery, because science requires trust and it takes time to earn trust. That's why I talked about Victor Iannello last week. You can only trust people if you know who they are. Especially a case like this, by the way, which is so technical and so filled with twists and turns. How do you know what's weird but true and what's weird and fake? It's not a trivial problem. So continuing that mission, I wanted to talk to you today about Richard Godfrey, which is a name you have heard on this podcast before. I spent an episode talking about his whisper theory. That was season 1, episode 28. And I've also talked about his claims that an Emirates pilot spotted MH370. That was season 2, episode 30. Godfrey was one of the original members of the independent group, along with me and Victor Iannello. He was really one of the most active from the get-go. Whenever someone back in those days suggested a new idea, he was always one of the first to tackle it, no matter how complicated the math was. He just would jump right in and have results with amazing speed. And over time, he became respected by a really wide range of people in the MH370 community and beyond. The Australian government thanked him by name in the final report into the disappearance of MH370. And later, when people came to the ATSB asking what it thought about Godfrey's claims that he could use ham radio data as a kind of over-the-horizon radar to track MH370's path, it issued a statement on February 16th, 2022, entitled Statement on Mr. Richard Godfrey's Analysis of the Location for Missing Aircraft MH370. In this statement, ATSB Chief Commissioner Angus Mitchell said that, quote, the ATSB is aware of the work of Mr. Richard Godfrey and acknowledges that he is a credible expert on the subject of MH370. So the Australian government has officially endorsed Richard Godfrey as a credible expert. A few months later, the agency issued a report in which it reviewed the previously collected seabed data to assess whether the plane could have wound up at the endpoint that Godfrey predicted using this whisper technique. To produce a report like that would no doubt take considerable time and expense. And it shows how highly they regarded him, because they wouldn't have done it if they thought he was a crank. Anyway, that regard for Godfrey continues to this day. He was featured prominently in a recent BBC documentary called Why Planes Vanish, The Hunt for MH370.
Retired aerospace engineer Richard Godfrey has worked with NASA, Boeing, and Airbus. He's among a handful of volunteer experts whose research into MH370 has been acknowledged by official investigators.
So clearly, Godfrey is a heavy hitter. He's a man to be taken seriously. And yet, if you look at his contributions to MH370, the MH370 conversation, a strange pattern emerges. Of course, there's the ham radio idea, the whisper concept, which Godfrey claims he has used to track MH370, making a wobbling course southward over the ocean like a giant bumblebee. Despite how influential this idea is, it is misinformation. I've tried to explain why that is, but frankly, a much more compelling and well-informed explanation than I was able to manage is given in a new YouTube video by SK999, he's not always seen eye to eye with me on this subject, but of MH370. But in this case, he does a really good job of explaining why whisper just cannot be used to track aircraft. I'll put a link in the show notes. I'll put a little clip at the end of this episode too, so you can get a taste of it. I think it's really good. I mean, don't stop watching this one, but check that one out too. Really, that piece of information is just one in a very long stream of erroneous ideas that he has spread over the years, often in collaboration with Blaine Allen Gibson and Jeffrey Thomas, his kind of frequent collaborators. Recently, he's made various claims on Thomas's YouTube channel, at one point claiming that the search had been called off before it even started. Then he claimed that Armada 7808 had been designated the search vessel. Then that Armada 7806 has been deploying ROVs and doing bathymetry And then, of course, who could forget the infamous Emirates sighting that turned out to not be remotely true. As Kevin Rupp noted recently, quote, "I've not seen Richard Godfrey get a single thing right for this search. If you were to believe him, then you should be tracking Armada 7808 right now, which is in the middle of the Atlantic." So, okay, why? Why does Godfrey keep getting the facts so wrong? What is going on? You almost have to wonder, is Godfrey really who he says he is? On his website, Godfrey has this biographical info about himself. Quote, "Richard Godfrey completed a Bachelor of Science at the University of Salford in Computer Science and Systems Engineering and a postgraduate diploma at the European Business School INSEAD in Paris. He has designed and successfully operated a number of avionics systems for a wide range of commercial and military aircraft, including Boeing 747, Panavia Tornado, General Dynamics F-16, and LTV A-7 Corsair. These avionics systems include autopilots, automatic landing systems, and flight management systems. He was the lead engineer for the integration and test of the European Space Agency's Space Lab and the NASA Space Shuttle. In this capacity, he designed and implemented an engineering simulator of the NASA Space Shuttle." Okay, wow, that is very impressive and obviously very relevant expertise in the quest to understand a complicated aviation mystery like MH370. Of course, it's all on the say-so of Godfrey himself, but any journalist who's going to quote him would surely make some sort of effort to verify that it's true. Given how impactful their endorsement of him has been, I reached out to the ATSB to ask them if they had verified Godfrey's employment history. And they got back to me. They said, quote, "Mr. Godfrey was known to the ATSB from his time as a member of the independent group during the original ATSB-led MH370 search. Any questions regarding Mr. Godfrey's professional qualifications and experience are best addressed to Mr. Godfrey," end quote. Which I take to mean no, we did not search his background. We didn't verify that he is who he says he is. But their suggestion was eminently reasonable. I did reach out to Richard. He has not replied. He's welcome to at any time. I welcome his contribution. I also reached out to the director of the BBC documentary to ask if he had tried to verify that Richard Godfrey is who he says he is, that he was an aerospace engineer. I haven't heard back from that gentleman. So I decided to dig in myself with some help from Keeley, as I often do. It's not really that hard to find traces of him online. He's been involved with several companies online. He has an online resume that lists some of the jobs he's had over the years. The details of that resume largely match that of another one written in German that I was able to obtain. It paints a picture that is quite at odds with the aerospace engineer of MH370 fame. The resume says that Godfrey was born in August 1950 in London, making him 75 now. It says that he got his degree in computer science at Salford University in 1972. Okay, that checks out. Then worked as a project manager at Marconi Avionics Systems until 1976. So this is his first job out of college. He was a freelance consultant for a while after that. He worked as operations director for a company called Cortex for 2 years. I haven't been able to figure out what that company is. After that, he worked in IT for Essers, which is a transport and logistics company. Then he was managing director at Infonet Systems, which describes itself as, quote, "a leading provider of software development solutions," end quote. And then starting in 1997, he's working with a whole bunch of banks, Dresdner Bank, Bank Gesellschaft Berlin, Norddeutsche Landesbank, Comdirect Bank, and so on. A lot of banks, a lot of financial institutions. That's the kind of thing he's doing for the rest of his career. So on his CV, he describes his experience and expertise, business models, process optimization, IT strategy, sales strategy, outsourcing, account management, training, coaching, and mentoring. He knows Java, XML, Oracle, SQL, Unix, Windows, etc. Basically, his expertise is in banking software, IT, managing teams and processes. I'll put up a link to the CV so you can look at it yourself. The thing that really stands out is that apart from his first job right out of college, there's not a single word in there about aviation. So Keeley, the tireless and resourceful researcher, bent over backwards trying to find any evidence that he worked on the space shuttle or for the ESA or did any of the things that he claims, and basically came to the conclusion that you can't prove a negative. ESA told us that he never worked for them. It's conceivable that he worked for a subcontractor, of which there are hundreds, but he did not work for ESA. Could he have worked for a subcontractor doing things like this? Maybe. These are high-powered aeronautical jobs that he's describing. Pretty high-powered for an independent contractor, aka freelancer. I mean, supervising the coordination of Space Lab and the space shuttle as a freelancer, and then not seeing fit to mention that on your resume. Well, there's one exception. Soon after 2014, when Richard was enjoying a modicum of fame, thanks to MH370, a documentary production company came calling, and he gave them a modified version of his resume. The newer version had all kinds of impressive aerospace names on it. He says, from 1982 to 1988, military projects, Germany, Honeywell, Frankfurt and Wegmann, Kessel, MBB, Rodian Schwartz, Munich Olympus, Harburg. He wrote, the software was written in a variety of 3GLs, I don't even know what that is, such as C, Corel, Pascal, running on Honeywell, Siemens, DEC, and HP computers. 1976 to 1981, Space Lab, Bremen, Germany, hardware software coordinator for the whole Space Lab integration and test program. The test system includes developing a complete simulation of the NASA space shuttle. The software was developed on an IBM mainframe in Go and HAL-S, two languages designed especially for NASA. So there's a strange coincidence, not strange, but an interesting coincidence here. My father spent his entire career at Honeywell, starting out as an optical engineer and winding up as an executive. So I asked him, I called him up down in Florida. I asked him if a company like that in the 70s and 80s, a company like Honeywell, would put an engineer, a freelancer, in charge of an important engineering project like Space Lab integration and test program. He said, no, that kind of thing happened later when cost cutting, became a corporate fad, but not in those days. If you're going to have a super important core project, core to your business, you would not have a freelancer running it. So I'm not saying that Godfrey didn't do freelance work for any of those companies, but what's clear in the context of his resume is that Godfrey is not an aerospace engineer. He has no expertise or background in aviation at all. He's a software IT back-end kind of guy. In fact, back in 2013, he was working on a book project about bank IT with a colleague named Frank Schwab. I reached out to Mr. Schwab and I said, this is what I said to him. I said, I've been researching the background of a leading MH370 researcher, Richard Godfrey, and I understand that you used to work together. I was wondering if I could ask you about him. He replied quite quickly. He said, yes, I worked with Richard in the banking technology industry. I wasn't aware of his interest in MH370, though. What would you like to know? But he did not respond to my follow-up questions. So as of 2013, he was in the banking technology sector. He's helping banks, run their processes, their mainframes, their information flow, security, I don't know, all that kind of stuff. So listen, there is no shame in being a bank IT guy. It takes a lot of brain power to do it for a living. These are complicated systems. But bank IT is a completely different thing from aerospace engineer. They are completely different things. So when the ATSB or the BBC refers to him as a retired aerospace engineer, they should correct themselves and refer to him as a retired banking technology consultant. Because once you start thinking of Godfrey as a retired bank IT guy, a lot of things start to make sense. Like all of those very self-assured proclamations about radar technology that don't make any sense to actual radar experts. As I've said before, I don't think that Richard is doing this to rip people off. I don't think he's making money off it. But when I think of Richard, I think of George Costanza from Seinfeld. He's a guy who doesn't get any respect in life And sometimes he fudges the truth a little because he wants to, get some respect. He wants to impress a woman, so he tells her he's a marine biologist. He wants to have a prestigious job, so he pretends to be an architect named Art Vandelay. None of these make-believe jobs make him rich. In fact, they inevitably backfire, and they leave him looking like even more of a schmuck than when he started. But for that brief little while, people are looking at him with admiration, treating him like someone they should listen to. Of course, Seinfeld is a comedy. There's no one getting hurt. It's not a tragedy. But MH370 is a tragedy. There are real human lives here, people who are missing their loved ones. And saying that you've invented a miracle technique to track the flight of a plane is not the same as saying that you can lower the cholesterol level in whales. Because what you're doing potentially is derailing a serious undertaking, a deadly serious undertaking. And I think that's not funny at all. Okay, that's all I have to say to you on that topic. I hope that you and others appreciate the significance of what I'm telling you. I don't want to leave you on a downer of a note. So instead, I'm going to leave you with a brief clip from SK999's video. You should check out the whole thing on YouTube if you harbor any uncertainty about whether Whisper really can be used to track planes.
In a previous publication, I analyzed the performance of links with the tripwire geometry. The bottom line is that the story is the same. Diffraction dilutes any scattered signal to the point of insignificance. Simon Maskell, a professor at the University of Liverpool, has appeared as a co-author on recent reports written by Godfrey. Like Godfrey, he enjoys being in the public spotlight. Here he is pictured appearing on BBC Breakfast in December 2024, explaining how Whisper operates like a tripwire when detecting aircraft. What Simon does not seem to be aware of is that in the most recent paper that he had co-authored from February 15, 2024, not a single link had the geometry of a tripwire. Simon, can you explain to the BBC what is going on instead with those links?
Thank you very much for that, SK999. That's all I have for you today. So thanks again for watching. This is Jeff Wise. I'll see you next time.